Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of video games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Up first for our two games this week is 2010's Heavy Rain, the serial killer mystery that brought motion control and QuickTime events to cinematic storytelling on the PlayStation 3.
After that, it's Insomniac's attempt to capture the feeling of being one of the world's most popular superheroes, 2018's Marvel's Spider-Man.
So I think a proper theme for this week is secret identities. Who is the Origami Killer? Who is the mastermind behind the Sinister Six? I think we'll talk about those in their respective critical tracks sections for the games. I mean, there are games we want to talk about. One of them is just shy of the 1 year mark we usually like to, kind of give as the kind of limit there for ourselves. But I think if we kind of limit them to the spoiler talk, at least to talking about the tracks in particular, where certain things have to come up, I think that's fair, because then we leave the education and the passing of knowledge about all the research we did, about the games, the composers, all that. You can enjoy that spoiler-free, at the very least, if that's something you're worried about. Joe, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing good. Also, the answer to both of those questions, who's the Origami Killer, who's the mastermind, I mean, it's just Peter Parker. Both of them are Peter Parker.
Peter Parker does everything. You're playing any fun games?
Playing Judgment, but that's really about it lately. Just trying to slowly work my way through that. It's hard to move through the plot when you keep stopping the plot to go make friends.
I mean, making friends in Kamurocho is kind of the point of that game. I beat that game. It's super fun. Everyone should go play it, especially if you love the Yakuza games, and we talked about Yakuza 0. Absolutely play Judgment. I started up The Division 2. We'll see how that goes. It was on sale for $20 finally this week, so I decided to give it a shot. I'm interested.
I hear real good things about it, so I'm interested to hear about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's get to our first game this week, and it is Heavy Rain. It's certainly an interesting game to talk about on a variety of things. And again, if you're just time skipping and joining us for this part, we will spoil the crap out of this game in the 5 critical tracks section. But until then, spoiler free. So, this is a David Cage game. When we talk about like the David Cage lineage and series of games in which David Cage, as the writer and director, tries to create games that are played as interactive movies in the medium while he's working at Quantic Dream. Now, you may have your preconceived notions about David Cage. Let's just say he is a controversial figure in the industry, but that really isn't the point. For context, though, David Cage created his first game, Omicron, the Nomad Soul, in 1999, and then followed it up with 2005's Fahrenheit, or as we know here in the United States, we know that game as Indigo Prophecy. Following that project, the concept for Cage's next game, Heavy Rain, was apparently originally pitched to Microsoft, who rejected it based on its child abduction themes. Sony, on the other hand, was in need of first-party exclusive titles, so they accepted to work with Quantic Dream on this project. And so a technology demonstration was constructed in a few months to show off the potential of the PlayStation 3. And as a result, Heavy Rain, the casting, was shown at Sony's direct request at their E3 2006 presentation. And yes, if you're wondering, Sony E3 2006, wasn't that the... Yes, that was the infamous presentation. $599 US. Ridge Racer beat this giant enemy crab. Weak point for like the whole bit. Heavy Rain first appeared in that presentation. The game took a while to be developed, though, and it released in North America ultimately on February 23rd, 2010 on PlayStation 3. PAL regions, EU, UK, Australia, they'd only have to wait a few days. No big PAL delay for this game, fortunately. It was all kind of in that week in February 2010. There was something called the Heavy Rain Chronicles that was planned as episodic prequel DLC, though, and it would explain things like, why would one character be addicted to this drug? Why would one character have insomnia? Only one part of it ended up being produced, and it was called The Taxidermist. It starred that female playable protagonist out of that set of 4 with a different voice actress, though, which is interesting. It was ultimately released on April 1st, 2010, and it was also included in an updated PlayStation Move edition of Heavy Rain, which gave players the option to use motion control, because remember, that was the time with Microsoft Kinect and PlayStation Move, and let's copy Nintendo Wii's motion control.
What an era.
It was quite the time, and yeah, it's hard to believe that was not even 10 years ago. Since then, though, Heavy Rain has been released as a digital version on PlayStation 4. That was first available in North America on March 1st, 2016. It is on PC now as part of the Epic Games Store as of June 24th, 2019. But if you're listening this month in July and you're a PlayStation Plus member, Heavy Rain is available for free throughout July 2019 as part of the Detroit Become Human Digital Deluxe package that is being offered as a free game through PlayStation Plus. So, if you like what you hear about this game and you've never tried Heavy Rain and you want to give it a try, if you're a PlayStation Plus member, you can do so for free. Do note, though, that the PS4 and PC versions do not include that DLC, unfortunately. So Heavy Rain was developed, as I said, by Quantic Dream. And of course, because it was a big exclusive for Sony, published by Sony Computer Entertainment. Heavy Rain is essentially a third-person point-and-click adventure game, where the player interacts with the environment through lots of quick-time events. If you're not familiar with the term, these are button presses, button holds, or analog stick movements at certain specific moments. Now, players can choose how a character responds to verbal prompts by selecting the corresponding thought that is swirling around the character's head, and those thoughts are tied to certain face button prompts. So that's kind of the way that they represented how to respond in conversations, and if moods are shaken up, these are kind of shaking as they move around the character's head. It's a really interesting way of doing things. Ultimately, all of these choices result in changes in the overarching story. And this was a time before Telltale Games made it big with these choose-your-own-adventure kind of stories with The Walking Dead in 2012. So this is kind of, David Cage's take on interactive games for a new generation on PS3 before you have all these Telltale-like adventure games. So certainly interesting. And it's notable that it was before Telltale really kind of refined the format, because the control in Heavy Rain is very weird, as it's like some weird amalgam of tank controls. So imagine, if you will, you're kind of in like this fixed camera that kind of changes camera angles as you move about different parts of the world. You have your character. The left analog stick, if you just move the left analog stick, your character is looking about the world. If you're moving, you happen to be moving, the left analog stick does change what direction you're moving in, but only left and right based on what the fixed camera is. And sometimes, the camera will pan, but it's very early Resident Evil in a way, but just a little bit more advanced, because like tank controls, you need to press a button to drive your character in a way. So R2, the right trigger on the PlayStation controller, is what moves the character. So if that weren't weird already, you see different prompts for either analog stick motions, mostly analog stick motions, or button prompts throughout the world. These are interacted with the right analog stick. And yeah, you have different face button prompts and things like that. And then there's also the 6-axis control, whereas the motion control in the original DualShock 3 controller You know, it does carry over to DualShock 4 as well for the PS4 version, but shaking the controller. So if a character grabs a carton of orange juice from the fridge and has to shake it, you're going to be shaking that controller. It's really weird. And just a sign of how these games played before, again, Telltale sort of refined the format. The plot of Heavy Rain revolves around the theme or the tagline of how far are you prepared to go to save someone you love. And it's really based on that, and, you know, sacrifice for loved ones, for a child. You start the game as Ethan Mars, and Ethan Mars has a great life with his wife Grace and his 2 kids, Jason and Sean. Well, after Jason is hit by a car and killed, and this also puts Ethan into a 6-month coma, life gets pretty depressing for Ethan. There's tons of guilt over the loss of his son, there's a divorce, there's shared custody with Sean, and it only gets worse when the serial murderer named the Origami Killer is on the loose in the town, and he's kidnapping young boys. Well, when Sean is the Origami Killer's next victim, Ethan has 3 days to save his son while being put through these heinous trials, all while there's the lingering suspicion that he himself may be the killer due to blackouts and mental trauma. You don't only play as Ethan Mars in Heavy Rain, though. You play as 3 other protagonists. You go through the perspective of Scott Shelby, who is a detective with asthma who is investigating the Origami Killer case. There's Madison Page, a journalist with insomnia who's conducting her own investigation into the Origami Killer. And Norman Jayden, who is a drug-addicted FBI agent who, you guessed it, is also on the case. Joe, this is where I stop and ask you here, what are your experiences with Heavy Rain?
Well, Heavy Rain was one of the first games that I bought when I bought a PS3. I bought a PS3 for myself as my graduation gift when I got out of high school, because when you graduate and your family's rich, you get a lot of money.
That's what grad parties are honestly for, yeah. So,
and also right around that time, GameStop had put out some like coupon to get like $100 off of a PS3.
Well, damn.
So I was like, all right, so the planets are aligning. We're getting a PlayStation 3, and I grabbed Heavy Rain. I think I also grabbed Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and I do not remember what the third game would have been.
So this would have been in at least 2011.
This would have been in 2011.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I got my PS3 in May 2011. So yeah, kind of around the same time.
I have played Heavy Rain, but that was, again, back in 2011. So I don't remember a lot of it from a gameplay standpoint, but I have watched, and this is where the unfortunate part has to come in the context of this podcast in general. All of my Heavy Rain experience after that came from the super best friends, who were, I guess, David Cage won on that front. He outlasted that. But they have infamously always been David Cage's greatest nemesis. Nemesis?
Yeah.
They are very much not big fans of David Cage, though they do, until his latest game came out, they did agree that Heavy Rain is the one they least dislike. I think it has a lot of problems, but I don't think it's a bad game, all things considered.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting to look at. I always think of it as it was really, interesting and pretty darn good for the time, but it's a game that is not aged well at all.
I agree with that. I also think that it's a game that if you go to replay it, you'll start to see a lot of holes in a lot of things.
Yeah, which
is a bit of a problem. And it's a game that even David Cage has said, like, play it once. Don't ever replay it. Do not play my games more than once.
I do not want you to see the foreshadowing in the game or where I may have lied to you.
That's not something I want to hear a director of a video game say, but he said it. And I kind of agree with him that it's a game that, like, once you have seen it or played it, you're probably good.
That's why it's important to talk about, and we'll get into spoilers again in the 5 critical tracks. But yeah, my experience with Heavy Rain is, it was also one of the first games I got when I bought a PS3. For me, it was L.A. Noire, it was Uncharted 1 and 2, and then I think Heavy Rain was the next one I played. Which are some pretty good games to start out a system with. Granted, it's like 5 years into the life of the system, but still, it was a good time for a PlayStation 3 owner. Post, hack and all of that stuff. So, learning more about Heavy Rain was really interesting, actually, just to kind of learn some of the facts and figures behind its development, because this was a game that took over 4 years to make. It had a budget of 40 million euro, and it had a 2,000-page long script, both on the game making and also the score creation front. People were often comparing it to saying it's like making 3 to 4 movies, and that's a heck of a lot of work, even really back then. Apparently, Philadelphia was used as inspiration for the city environment. And Heavy Rain was different than, games at the time. We're 3 years into the big Call of Duty push. I mean, Modern Warfare, Call of Duty 4 was 2007. And so, shooters really took off from there. And so, one of the main goals for Heavy Rain was to really have a human experience story with interaction and emotion, not just like an action game with pew pew guns. But this is also more of a means of recognizing that more adults were playing games than ever before. And so it's a way to try to create a game that was more meant for those adults. Heavy Rain was also in the early days of proficient motion capture in games. There was apparently 172 days of shooting on a whole bunch of different sets. I think it was about 60 different sets. There were 30,000 unique animations. But when you go back and look at it, though, there's still a whole lot of jank to it. And I think it really makes you appreciate Naughty Dog and how Naughty Dog was, at the time, top of the class, and today is just incredible. I can't wait to see The Last of Us 2. And just how Naughty Dog is just the best. But you also have to think about how Heavy Rain's work began so early. I mean, coming off of the teaser in 2006 and then going from there. Though because it took so long, when you look at the 2010 release date, it kind of reflects a bit poorly on Heavy Rain. Because then you look at 2011, the next year, and then there's L.A. Noire. This game where it's the first game to just really truly impress with facial motion capture at the time, with this technology where it was 32 cameras recording performances. Looking at behind the scenes footage for Heavy Rain, when it came to recording dialogue, you had actors with motion capture dots across their face and a single camcorder pointing at them. It's a lot of work to get the capture for the face, and even then it's not going to be that impressive. So again, it's early days of really good motion capture, but I don't know, Joe, if you've recently gone back and seen footage, it's a little rough. I mean, we're 9 years removed and spoiled as heck, especially when it comes to my God, your game that you'll talk about soon. But it's a little rough to go back and look at Heavy Rain. Just hasn't aged well.
Characters look kind of dead-eyed in Heavy Rain now when you go back to look at it. Especially Madison's face, I think, is the worst of it. She just looks so soulless. But no, you're right. Back then, that was impressive, all things considered. Considering that this was coming from the PlayStation 2, in which faces were, unless they were anime proportioned, they weren't all that great. And then even before that, you went back to PS1 where characters' faces were a massive pixels stretched on a polygon.
Yeah, super rough. So like, yeah, it was good for the time, but the technology has just come so far. And it's interesting you mentioned Madison because like she was modeled off of like this actual model like that David Cage had some fascination with. Go figure. And she did like all the motion capture, like the body motion capture work. But then it was for the face and the voice, it was this American actor. And so it is this kind of mishmash where like the other characters, like they look like they're actual actors, but Madison, for whatever reason, it's this weird mishmash. Speaking of the casting, it is infamously questionable, particularly with accents or how they try to mask them. There were apparently 14 casting sessions with 457 actors auditioned, bringing it all down to 90 roles. I think I personally like Sam Douglas's performance as Scott Shelby the best. Though, looking back at it, it seems he kind of looks a little bit, but also his delivery is a little bit William Shatner-like. I had never really thought about that before without, when going back to see this, it's like, oh, the way he talks and how he's kind of delivering things, it's Shatner-esque. But then Judy Beecher is the voice and at least facial capture performance as Madison Page. And she's a close second because like they're both American, at least. I mean, Scott Shelby's actor, Sam Douglas, born in England, but English American, so must have some American side to it. Judy Beecher, an American actress. So when they're giving American accents, it's believable. But then you have Pascal Langdale, who is an English actor, as Ethan Mars. And he's a little stiff, and he has odd pronunciation and some inflection moments. It's just a little different. Just the delivery makes you feel a little uncomfortable. And I think the worst, though, out of the four main protagonists, though, is Leon Ockenden as Norman Jayden. Because woof. I mean, I think like that's the epitome. There's an old Seth Meyers bit of like the Boston accent and like the different characters trying the Boston accent. It's like the epitome of the British actor who is trying a Boston accent and not pulling it off at all. Because, man, whenever Norman Jayden talks, it's a trip.
I think I remember Jayden being bad. I know I remember Ethan being bad.
I think Jayden's the worst, especially when he's saying his name is Norman Jayden. And it's like, what the hell? So with that Heavy Rain, the casting preview, I don't know if you've ever gone back to watch that because, again, for 2006, that was some good performance capture and graphics for the time. But it's incredible how far we've come because it is still so rough to look at and watch. But David Cage, as cast as the role in that as Mary Smith, this actress trying for a role. So Mary Smith was cast as this actress from France named Aurélie Bancillon. That's my best stab at the name. Sorry, not French. So Aurélie Bancillon was cast as Mary Smith in this preview. And Cage was apparently so impressed by her acting that she returned for this game as Lauren Winter, who's a character that interacts with Scott Shelby. So she gives a better performance than I think she did in the casting because that French accent is very thick in the casting for an American actress. It's still here in Heavy Rain. It's just not as evident, but still there. But like the casting of kids as French kids trying to play American kids is a train wreck.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. It's so bad. Like every kid is a nightmare. Like how does this happen? So like there are good moments. Like again, we're before the times of Telltale and Clementine and Lee and what we expect from these story-driven narrative games. Heavy Rain has its moments, but other times it's woof.
Every time somebody mentions the kids in Heavy Rain, I think about that one scene where that one kid's like, help! Help!
Yeah.
It's like, I believe you are dying, child.
Yes, mortal peril is
You have given the greatest performance.
So yeah, it's just so rough. I think a lot of people really do remember this game for its strange moments. Of course, there's the infamous Jason!
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 Jason?
We had a point at when Ben and I worked at summer camp, we ended up making it a thing where we just like walk out of our cabin and shout, Jason! And like 5 people from across the staff village would echo the Jason.
Perfect.
Until one person ended it by screaming, Sean!
Sean! Have you ever seen the video? I'm sure where it's glitched at the end sequence, and like he can keep playing Sean. He's being chased and like all this action, but still can press X whenever to say Sean.
That's
Sean!
one of my favorite videos on the entirety of the internet. It's so good. And it's still attached to Ethan's model, like the thing that's making the sound. So when the scene moves away from Ethan, it sounds farther away, but you can still hear it in the distance. Oh, it's so good.
It's just incredible. But there's also things like the sex scene, because it's a David Cage. And of course, there's a sex scene, and just a lot with Madison. The shower.
Oh, the worst of all, though, is still like I want you to give me a child is still one of the worst things that has ever been put into a video game.
It's just, also there's a lot with Madison that's just not okay. But, I think just overall, like for its time, it was still kind of is a gripping narrative, and it's an interactive experience that had not really been accomplished to that level before. And so it was reviewed well for its time, with averages for the PS3 version in the high 80s. I had to laugh at this quote, kind of summarizing the reviews on Wikipedia here. So enjoy this, saying, quote, "The game received praise for its emotional impact, visuals, writing, controls, voice acting, and music. Critics conversely faulted the controls, voice acting, and plot inconsistencies." So, like, the writing, controls, and voice acting, it's entirely hit or miss. Like, it's a point of praise, but it's also, like, the big problems with the game.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
Yeah, so, again, like I said, I think it was really good for the time, before we knew what these kind of games could be. But yeah, it just hasn't aged that well, because the PS4 release on Metacritic is at least like 10 points lower. I think people were getting wise to like, oh, this is what these games could be, and this is not it anymore.
Well, yeah, that came out in a post like Until Dawn, Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Like, Until Dawn is the game that Heavy Rain wishes it was.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And we'll eventually talk about that game, because that's a game.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So Heavy Rain is one of the better selling games on PS3, actually. It sold over 5 million copies. And I think it kind of marks a point where, after October 2009's Uncharted 2 Among Thieves, it really continues Sony's trend of just really delivering quality exclusives in the back half of the PS3's life cycle. And like that continued into PS4's success, and just it really kind of continued from there. So like Heavy Rain's kind of part of the uptick of all of that. The game did win some awards at the time for its story and its technical innovation. And, maybe it was like a nominee for Best PS3 Game of the Year, like at best. It didn't really reach like the ranks of Game of the Year for 2010. The score, however, it did win a BAFTA and an Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences award, which now it's the DICE Awards. So like the score is lauded, and that's kind of why we're talking about it today. As far as legacy goes, David Cage would go on with Quantic Dream to make 2013's Beyond Two Souls and 2018's Detroit Become Human. I think Beyond had its issues with this back and forth, jumping all over the place, chronological mess of a narrative, whereas Detroit, I think it was just a bit too on the nose with its civil rights commentary.
Even though David Cage says it's not about race,
Yeah, sure, it's not.
Have I ever shown you the clip of Loading Ready Run has a stream called Talking Simulator where they play games and talk about the design in them as they go. And one of the games they played recently was Detroit Become Human. And as they had just finished playing, somebody mentioned in the chat, like, yeah, it's time to play this game that's totally not about race. And one of the hosts was like, I actually kind of agree that it's not about race because it seems too open-ended to be about anything. And as she was talking, the character on the title screen started talking about how Detroit was in the Underground Railroad.
Yeah, I've seen that, and they do the whole "I Have a Dream" equivalent, and it's a bit much, but I think both of those games are really interesting in the same types of ways. Like, they're flawed, sure. David Cage has his quirks, but they're really interesting, and I like playing them. Honestly, even if they're not the best games, like I'll like to play them, at least give them a first go. Certainly, Beyond Two Souls and Detroit Become Human both have much better actor casting at the very least. So there is that going for it. The score for Heavy Rain, composed by Normand Corbeil. Normand Corbeil, born on April 6th, 1956 in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. He has some composing influences that include Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, and Ravel. He apparently does play the piano because it's apparently his performance on Heavy Rain's score. Like, it's him playing the piano, which I found very interesting because not often do we see composers actually doing that, especially when it's like big orchestration. And there really isn't much of a biography available for him online. And that's unfortunate because this is the first time we're bringing up in this show so far, 25 episodes in, that Normand Corbeil was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in August 2012, and he died on January 25th, 2013, at the age of 56. So more often than not, when you search Normand Corbeil, it's often, with old news articles saying that this great video game composer passed away due to cancer, or remembering Normand Corbeil, and like that sucks in a lot of ways, because he is a remarkable composer, was a remarkable composer, and just, his work lives on, certainly. Even to the point with these different stories covering that, like, he was working on the score for Beyond Two Souls at the time, and his work was passed to Lorne Balfe to finish, and like the game is devoted to him, like in his honor. It sucks that it's just not like, this composer lived a long life and he passed away peacefully, and it's just that, cancer being a jerk as it is. So hate for this to be like the first one where we have to bring up a composer who's no longer with us, but unfortunately that's the case.
Yeah, I'm kind of actually surprised. Well, no, I can't say I'm surprised that this is the first time we've brought up a composer who is no longer with us, simply because it is such a new medium. Pretty much every composer we've talked about, as pretty much almost the oldest we've gotten, is born in the 50s. I think 40s might be the oldest we hit, but I don't remember who that would have been.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, even the Japanese composers, like 60s, 70s, that's where you'll find them. It's a shame. 56 is young. That's a young time to go out.
Yeah, that's just awful. But again, his work does live on in these interactive mediums. So his discography, he worked on Fahrenheit or Indigo Prophecy. Though at the time he helped this composer named Angelo Badalamenti, who was kind of, at least he did the main theme for that game, but contributed healthily to that game. So then he continued, and Heavy Rain was his big game. Like, that was like his work. He won those awards for that work on Heavy Rain, and so then he continued on to Beyond Two Souls, and unfortunately that's when cancer caught up with him. But Normand Corbeil before then was like a film composer. So he's worked on like more than 50 films. Some notable ones include Double Jeopardy. That's a movie with Tommy Lee Jones there. There's The Statement and Extreme Ops as a couple others. He also had 2 Emmy Award nominations for his TV work, particularly for CBS's Hitler, The Rise of Evil in 2003, and Lifetime's Human Trafficking in 2006. Some interesting notes about Heavy Rain's soundtrack development. It was recorded at the famous Abbey Road Studios, which is, just amazing. What a studio to record at. There were apparently around 250 musical cues written for the game and 75 to 80 musicians involved. So a lot of work. I mean, going back to that whole thing of it's 3 to 4 movies worth, and it's a whole lot. Corbeil said that it was important not to think about it as game music, especially in the formative days of composing on the project. I mean, think of it like another movie. Apparently, because David Cage is a musician too, and he didn't want to involve himself specifically in the music, but his role was more offering the guidance towards the character motivations. So as a result, each character's themes and cues were driven by specific instrumentation based on the character's outlooks on life. So Ethan would be more driven by piano, Scott would be driven by jazzy brass and flutes, Madison would have a small chamber orchestra, and Norman would have this dark-toned symphony orchestra, just because he has all this technology and whatnot at his disposal. Music production apparently started on June 5th, 2009. The game launched February 23rd, 2010. Corbeil apparently had only 2 months to deliver on all of the music. David, why did you do this? That's not fair, man. 2 months? Corbeil said the reason why they waited until the end, because they were not sure exactly how they wanted the music. And of course, more music was required for a movie because there are so many beginnings, so many middles and ends because of all the choices that can be made. So he said, you have to take care that each piece of the puzzle fits together. And he finished the quote up by saying, I did ask that if I am involved in a next game that I am given a bit more time. Yeah, maybe more than 2 months, David.
I would certainly hope so.
So, yeah, I think Corbeil's biggest takeaway from this was, I think he was really proud of his work on Heavy Rain, as he should be. He hoped that it would bring other classical composers to write scores for games. He said, quote, for me, the interactivity is inspiring to know that somebody can decide to go one way or another. I think it holds a lot of possibilities for storytelling and for a composer. Heavy Rain is just the start. And when you look at it from there, you've had a whole lot of other composers join the ranks of video game composers. So I'm not saying that Norman Corbeil was the start of this movement, but Heavy Rain's score did help a lot because it is very film-like. It's not like a traditional game. So yeah, let's kind of hear what we mean here in the critical tracks. And again, if this is your point where you have not played Heavy Rain and you want to stay unspoiled for the game, might want to back out now because we'll kind of have to talk about certain things. Let's start with the first critical track here, Ethan Mars's main theme. I mean, man, what a powerful violin melody. And it's like piano in the back there kind of, drawing everything towards it, but it's that soaring violin. This is the theme, might as well just be for the whole game, I think. It's the one that everyone pins to this game. It's you want to know the tune that's oh yeah, that's Heavy Rain's soundtrack. It's this one. It's Ethan Mars's main theme. It's the first on the soundtrack, at least when they put it in track order. So I mean, even though it's Ethan's theme, it kind of encompasses the whole thing. Corbeil had a quote about this one saying that, quote, the theme is something very human. fragile but strong at the same time.
I don't know. I don't remember a lot of the music from Heavy Rain. So like hearing the samples, this is basically my first time hearing any of these songs outside of the game, which is a pattern for both of the games being talked about today. But this is the one I think I remember more than nothing at all. Because again, this is the song people talk about when they talk about Heavy Rain. Yeah. They talk about Ethan Mars' theme. The
score does a really good job, like amplifying the moment in the game. It's like a film in that sense. It's not like traditional game music where it's like, I mean, like a Mega Man stage. Like it has to drive what you're hearing. It has to drive the melody and all that. But like this is like really good support, and so you'll get these themes that kind of push through. And so this is a really good example of this one. So here, when we're talking about spoilers, again, like get out now if you really don't want to. I'm gonna keep warning you here. So Ethan Mars goes through these 5 trials, up to 5 trials, to save his son, the Origami Killer. Oh, and we didn't talk about. Oh gosh. Okay, just tangent here. When we're talking about like the bad accents and hiding, did you ever notice like how often the characters would say the Origami Killer?
I remember Jaden saying that a lot.
Oh yeah, and it's more than just Jaden. It's more characters than there should be. Like, he's the antagonist of the game. You probably should pronounce his name properly. The Origami Killer. So the Origami Killer is kind of providing these tasks to Ethan to, if you really want to save your son, prove how much you would sacrifice for him. So to kind of run through them all, there's driving the opposite way down a highway. There's this maze of hazards with, glass shards on the floor and the goddamn electrical section. There's cutting off the end of one of your fingers.
That's the one most people remember.
Oh yeah, like that's the one, because it's...
Yakuza do that all the time. Maybe you should stop whining.
That's a good point. There's would you kill a man, and then would you drink poison. So those are kind of like the 5 trials. And yeah, I was going to say, like, yeah, everyone remembers the cutting off a finger. Like that's, if there's the one like game moment that remains like a memory, it's that one for sure.
It's that and driving the wrong way on the highway are the 2 that stick out the most in my memory.
Because driving the wrong way, like that's the first one for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely have to do that one. At a certain point, like depending on how it goes, like Ethan may get arrested and the story may divert from there. Like, I don't remember doing the poison drinking because I think he was already arrested by that point.
I don't think I remember the poison drinking one either.
And it's a thing where it's like he'll drink the poison and he'll die at a certain point. But then it was like a sort of false flag, like it wasn't really poison, but it's like, would you do it to save your son, kind of thing. That's why they get to have that happy ending and put a baby in me. Yeah, so there's that. Number 2 on the Critical 5, Scott Shelby's main theme. So, because Scott is a detective, this is very noir heavy, very detective like, with it's jazz. It's those trumpets, like that's his sort of leitmotif there. You get this suspense-filled tension in the brass chords, whether it's just the dissonance of like the trumpet notes or it's the hard, low brass coming in to accentuate things. This is like a 6-minute long track and it goes through a range of moods. So like if there's one to listen to, I think maybe listen to this whole one, but the sample I provided for you, I think is the most memorable bit, the more kind of iconic one here. Joe, let's talk about the big twist.
You mean the one where the game lies to you?
The big spoiler, and I think it's one of the biggest spoilers in like how it can kind of ruin the game for you. Again, like we've been trying to really drive you away. If you really didn't want to know, the idea that Scott Shelby is the Origami Killer was, they apparently did a focus group with 70 people, and they said that nobody was able to guess correctly.
Almost like the game tells you he's not the Origami Killer and then tells you he is.
Yeah, it's like it's actively deceptive that they're trying to, he does weird things like he does the whole thing with the typewriter that like that's his mistake and how it can be tied back to him and all that. But he's going through all these actions that you're putting him through.
And also, you can hear his thoughts.
Yeah.
Where he's thinking about how he is investigating the Origami Killer.
And, like, yeah, he's doing all these things. He's putting himself in danger that he should not have to do. Granted, it's apparently for the reasons that he's collecting evidence from his past crimes to then burn them in his waste paper basket in his office. But when you're finding yourself tied up in a car that's sinking, maybe you done goofed. Or is that all a lie too, David? I don't know. Yeah, it's certainly a twist that does come pretty much out of nowhere, and it's the reason, like, test the father's loyalty because this drunk father certainly didn't save John Shepard, his friend at the time, who drowned underwater, and that's why he puts these kids in a bucket where rain fills up the bucket and drowns the kids. Yeah, it has these weird sort of plot holes because the game actively lies to you in a means to try to cover it up.
Yeah, I think that's my biggest problem with Heavy Rain. More than anything. It's not so much, because the thing is, if it was like, oh man, I can see the hints here and here and here, and not, oh, it's him and the game told me otherwise, because otherwise there'd be no twist. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's unusual. And it's a shame. Like, I liked the Scott Shelby character the most. I like detective games. That's why I liked Judgment. Go play Judgment this year. But yeah, so I'm kind of drawn to those characters. And then for him to be doing dirty like that, the whole murder of the old shopkeeper guy. And it's like, you played that scene. You saw it end. Oh, but no, what really happened is he went back and clubbed him with a typewriter. Like, come on.
Yeah, it's not a well done twist.
Yeah, but it's certainly memorable. It's one of those things that, like, yeah, you can talk about Would You Kindly and other big twists like that. No, Scott Shelby as the Origami Killer is one that, like, I think people still get really sour about seeing out there for some reason. It's been 9 years. It's again why we had to kind of go through all the steps to make sure, like, if you don't want it spoiled. Anyway, number 3 on the critical tracks, Lauren Winter's main theme. So Lauren Winter is an interesting character, and especially when we're tying her to Scott Shelby here, because Lauren Winter is introduced in this game as a sex worker. And of course, David Cage just handles it with the greatest class. I mean,
the class he is well known for.
I mean, some of that writing, like, oh, you got 10 minutes and when the alarm goes off, just David enough. But Lauren Winter is important because her son was killed by the Origami Killer. And so she comes to Scott Shelby looking for a detective's help, or eventually she comes to his help, but he more comes to her to look into, and there's a guy who threatens to beat her up and Scott Shelby beats him up. So she wants to, okay, it's David Cage writing. Anyway.
He's very good at women.
Yeah. Yeah. So Lauren Winter and Scott Shelby are tied in this narrative. And so when it comes to Lauren Winter's main theme, like, it's a beautiful piece. Like, there are these just really soothing chords. It's relaxing. It's this beautiful music. And it's strange for a mother in grief trying to come to terms with her son's passing and find answers in a cruel world. But it's this really pleasant music to listen to. And I found it really memorable in the game, but also I feel so much guilt. I feel so much guilt because in my playthrough, they get to the point where I mentioned before, like, Scott and Lauren Winter are tied up in this car and it's sinking and like they're drowning. The car is sinking. I did some action where like I was trying to explore all my options for how to escape, and Lauren Winter's there in the passenger seat. And I thought I was choosing like the option that was not what would advance the story, but I apparently somehow did it. And there I am as Scott Shelby escaping the car while Lauren Winter is left in the vehicle.
Ooh, no.
To drown.
Well, now I know not to get stuck in a car with you going underwater.
So that is where my Lauren Winter story ended. It didn't end with the comeuppance of her killing the Origami Killer out of anger. No, she died in that car. And I just feel so guilty about that. Like, that's the one thing of my playthrough that is just like, it's like, that's not what I meant to do. Like, do I reset? No, I just live with my decisions and feel like a terrible person. Like, so it's just a combination of things there. Number 4 on the critical tracks, The Chase. I think this is the most memorable action music in the game. It does go along with some of Ethan's trials, but on the soundtrack it's identified as Madison's action theme. So, particularly the sequence where there's an attacker in her apartment. It's a pretty memorable one for just like the action, fight scene, choreography, quick time events, etc. And I like this one because like it doesn't really seem like a Heavy Rain song on this soundtrack, but it's very cinematic nonetheless. I like this one a whole lot. Joe, what do you think of it?
I mean, I think I can sort of picture it happening in that Madison scene. I think it sounds very similar to some of the stuff from my game, all things considered.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Not gonna lie, it has the same sort of feel to some of the stuff we're gonna talk about in Spider-Man.
Some of the hits and some of the pace and all that. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I put this on a Super Smash Brothers stage when I was doing like the music hacking back in the Wii days. And boy, that was a trip.
Which one?
Oh gosh, I almost want to say maybe it was like Fourside. I don't know. I like it was like some hacked stage of like Fourside because it couldn't have been in Brawl. Maybe Project M. I have no idea. It was some obviously nothing fit with this song, but
I could sort of see this at a Metroid stage, maybe.
Maybe. Oh yeah.
I'd like to point out that in our show we have both talked about a song that we put on a Smash stage through hacking means, and both of them have been Mother stages.
Yeah. It just kind of fits, I guess. So
I mean, because mine was Oldies But Happies on Winette from Jet Set Radio.
That's right. So yeah, good times there. Number 5 on the critical tracks. We're gonna go with Looking for Sean. Sean! I mean, the end level action music here, just the big tense moments here, and everything's really coming together. Like, this is the big climactic moment. Sean has been found, but how will you take care of the Origami Killer, and are you able to save him? I think in my playthrough, like Ethan might have ended up being like knocked out, but like Madison was still there. And so it was like mostly Madison like taking on Scott Shelby and able to save Sean and have a happy ending overall. I think Norman somehow ended up dead at the end of my playthrough though. I don't remember much about the game as far as how mine ended, because like there are plenty of different endings, like a whole bunch. But yeah, this one's really memorable because just that big ending, climactic moments.
I think I got out with all my characters alive. I think.
Done.
Well, obviously, minus Scott.
Right, of course, yeah.
And Lauren might have been dead too, I think. I don't remember. Not in the way that...
Not in the way I killed her.
Not in the way you killed her, but I don't remember how I would have killed her.
Goddamn monster.
I know Ethan is the one that found Sean. I know Norman's the one that fought Scott. I don't know where the hell Madison was at the time.
Oh, so Norman fought Scott for you. Interesting.
Yes, I believe so. If I remember correctly.
So yeah, a whole lot of possibilities for sure. I have a couple tracks on the cutting room floor. Let's have one of them be Painful Memories.
Yeah, when you talk about Hanako's theme, it's really just, this is the real one.
We already talked about that, jeez. That was already one on the cutting room floor for that game, jeez. Yeah, this is obviously using the Ethan Mars leitmotif. It's kind of more like just to reflect on the pain of his child loss. And it's been described as like it's something intimate, really designed in that way. Particularly like something that you were playing for your child while he's next to you and you're playing on the piano. So yeah, Normand Corbeil on piano. This is a really memorable one. It just goes hand in hand with the Ethan Mars theme, but just kind of a more piano toned down sort of version. The other one then is the Bulldozer. And so this is Norman Jayden's action theme. Just big tension on this one. Just big time here. Like time's running out. You have to use your crazy augmented reality technology that helps you solve crime to be able to figure all these things out. And it also just plays big on like the drug addict anxiety that Norman has to deal with. Like it's tryptocane, this drug that is supposed to help him deal with the side effects of using this RE augmented reality system. Yeah, and so he just has these battles, these inner demons that he kind of fights with the whole game. And so this music's kind of playing on that. I find it very interesting.
Every time I think about Norman action scenes, I just think about, so the best friends played the game twice. They have a full LP, but then they also did a stream because one of their members, Wooly, had never played it. It was the only David Cage game he hadn't played, minus Omicron, which became its own amazing Let's Play. Because that game, you want to talk about didn't age well. Oh, but I remember watching this stream, and I had to get up and help my dad make dinner, and so I did. I went out to help him set some stuff up. I was gone for about 5 minutes. And then when I came back, Norman was dead. I believe he got killed in the junkyard because Wooly screwed up. And so Norman was just gone. That's what I'll never forget.
Yeah, I think I'll never forget how I just associate with my early PS3 days. I mean, I mentioned like it was among the first games I got to play. I think we've said enough about this game. Like, yeah, it's a flawed adventure, certainly, but it's a captivating one, especially for the time. But plenty of other narrative games have done a whole lot better since then. So, again, if you have PS Plus, it's worth checking it out and adding it to your library through the Detroit Become Human digital deluxe version for free.
And to be honest, let's give credit where credit is due. Without Heavy Rain, some of the games that we've talked about now, such as Until Dawn, maybe even Telltale's like that what would have been their modern stuff.
Life is Strange. I mean, yeah.
Life is Strange, absolutely. Like, I think Heavy Rain paved the way for those games more than people like to give it credit for. Mm-hmm. Same with Indigo Prophecy, even though I think that game is really stupid.
But yeah, for better or for worse. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. So to transition games, I like to talk about a fan cover, whether it's on OC Remix, on YouTube. I found one from Amela on YouTube. It's a cover of Painful Memories. It kind of bumps it up a little bit, a little more electronic to it. I like it a lot. I think you will too. We'll be right back.
Dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun. We're here to talk about Spider-Man. He's Spider-Man, and he can do anything a spider can.
It's the Spider-Man!
Let's do this. This game was originally released for the PlayStation 4 on September 7th, 2018. So, like Peter's been saying, this game has not quite been out for a year yet. We're a couple months out from its year anniversary. So we're going to try and dance around spoilers again until we hit the critical tracks, at which point it's going to be kind of hard to do that.
So yeah, but there are moments where we got to gush and we got to talk about it. So again, we'll contain the spoilers there in the critical tracks. But for now, let's learn about some Spider-Man.
So if you don't know who Spider-Man is, where have you been? He is one of, if not the most popular superhero in the world. The only character I think could possibly trump Spider-Man in terms of popularity is maybe Superman, but even then, I'd give it to Spider-Man before I gave it to Superman.
Spider-Man has global appeal.
Oh,
like,
yeah, 100%.
We're seeing from, the movies, the moopies. We're seeing from there, like, they're doing gangbusters globally. I mean, big in Japan, big in China, big worldwide. I don't know if you could say the same thing about Superman.
I mean, Superman's very popular in America.
As is Spider-Man.
as is Spider-Man. Spider-Man is basically responsible for the tokusatsu craze beginning in Japan. So, in a way, Spider-Man is the reason Power Rangers exists. Like, this dude has some appeal. I think Superman and Batman are the only two, maybe Wolverine are the only ones that, until recently, when the MCU has thrown a bunch of, like, people that would have been, like, B-list to anybody that didn't read comics, or C-list even, has thrown those people into the limelight. Before then, you had Spider-Man. He was created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko in 1962, so he's been around for a long while. I want to say this is the first time we have talked about a game based on a character that has been around since before video games.
It's probably a good point. Yeah, it's a good point.
Since his creation, he has been in cartoons, he has been in films, and of course, he's been in video games. He almost single-handedly started the superhero movie craze that we still find ourselves in today. He has been in 7 standalone films. That is the Raimi trilogy, Spider-Man 1, 2, 3, the Amazing Spider-Man movies, of which there are 2, and the MCU Spider-Man movies, of which there is Homecoming, and the recently released Far From Home. He was also prominently featured in Captain America Civil War, and Avengers Infinity War, as well as a part in Avengers Endgame.
So I know some people will say, like, technically, X-Men was, like, the first superhero movie there. No, let's be real. Like,
Spider-Man started the craze.
Spider-Man was the one that really got that ball rolling. Like, you could say, yes, chronologically, X-Men was first, but not everyone was flocking to theaters to see X-Men like they were Spider-Man.
It was kind of the second superhero movie craze, too, because Batman and Superman had sort of started their own.
Oh, yeah,
but
sure.
Then they started coming out with bad movies, like Batman and Robin, Superman 4. Just not great films. and people were starting to be like, oh, I guess that was a fad. And then Sam Raimi's Spider-Man came out. And I think Spider-Man 1 and 2 still hold up really well, unlike X-Men 1, 2, or 3.
Spider-Man 1 has a bit of a weird element to it if you look back on it. Like, I mean, just look at the scene where Spider-Man is conversing with Green Goblin and their faces are not moving. Green Goblin specifically, and he's just like, he's posing there and is just gestating. And the face is just mask. Like, it's a little weird to look back on.
But yeah, he's currently one of the central characters of the MCU. He's basically filling in the slot as I mean, he's an Avenger now. He, like I said, just got a movie released a couple weeks ago, Spider-Man Far From Home, which I've already seen twice. It's very, very good.
Yeah, it's excellent. Go see it.
And well, he's had pretty okay luck in the realm of movies. 7 standalone films, only 2 of them considered not good. Games are kind of a different story. Spider-Man has been appearing in games since 1982 when he appeared in a game called Spider-Man on the Atari 2600. And from there, he has been in, you name the genre, he's probably been in it. He's been in text adventures. He has been in platformers. He has been in beat-em-ups. He has been in fighting games. And most of those suck. Even, I found this really interesting when I was just looking up a list of Spider-Man games. Rareware made a Spider-Man game for the Game Boy in 1990.
Oh, interesting.
I had no idea. It was a side-scrolling beat-em-up, which is basically where Spider-Man lived at that time. But yeah, most of these games sucked. There are a couple of notable examples that I won't name here because I don't care. Because they have been made obsolete by the game we are here to talk about. But, like, especially after making the move to 3D, Spider-Man games just got really, really bad. And there's one very important reason. Because web swinging is really hard to program, it turns out. Web swinging that felt good and cool. Because if you released a 3D Spider-Man game and swinging on webs didn't feel good, get out of here. Why'd you even bother releasing? The closest example to a Spider-Man game before this with good web swinging was, weirdly enough, 2004's Spider-Man 2, which was based on the film of the same name. And can I be perfectly honest and give a hot take that nobody else is going to like? That game still sucks.
It's still unrealistic, and I don't know why it was the standard. I mean, yeah, it was fun to go fast, but
it's better than everything that had come before it.
Yes, absolutely. Let's be fair.
That's why people liked it so much, is because compared to everything that had come before it, and compared to most things that came after it, Spider-Man 2 had the best web swinging. It did so by doing using this technique called raycasting, which basically just shot a web off screen and it attached to the sky and you swung your web and there was momentum. And I guess it feels kind of good. I still don't think it feels great. And also, again, game's still not very good. It's still a licensed tie-in game. And you're going to find the pattern for most Spider-Man games is that almost all of them were licensed tie-in games for movies, for cartoons. And the problem with making a licensed game is that developers aren't given a lot of time to make those. Those games are made very rushed because they cannot move the release date. It has to come out when this thing comes out. Spider-Man 2 has to come out the day that Spider-Man 2 the movie comes out. It's plot details, but it's also, what's the point at that point? Nobody's talking about Spider-Man 2 2 months after Spider-Man 2's not in theaters anymore, or at least that's how Activision saw it. That's how a lot of big publishers see it.
And it's always interesting to think about like Batman Arkham Asylum breaking the mold, because like that was supposed to be at a time where like you had to have a Batman, the Dark Knight's coming out. You got to have a game. And like, no, we're going to push it back and have it be its own thing. And like, that's what broke the mold there. So yeah, another superhero thing.
And I honestly do think that if Arkham Asylum had never come out and then Arkham City had never come out and done really well, this game probably would not exist.
No, I think you're right. Yeah.
I think we can thank that game a lot for breaking that pattern. But yeah, Spider-Man games were basically just rushed movie tie-ins, or they were shovelware titles, of which I've played a couple. They're not good. And that's why, at E3 2016, people's interests peaked just a little bit when Sony announced that the studio famous for making the Ratchet & Clank games, Insomniac Games, was making a Spider-Man game simply titled Spider-Man that was not being made to coincide with a film release, that was not being made to tie into the MCU, that was going to be given as much time as it needed to be good. Turns out if you give all those things, a good game comes out.
Wow.
What a concept. Fun fact, I was in your guys' basement when this game was announced.
Yeah, that was a good time.
That's the thing I mostly remember about that. So work on the game began in 2014, which is shortly after Insomniac had just released their Xbox One exclusive title, Sunset Overdrive, which if I remember correctly, didn't do great.
It was one of the ones I own the game, but it was through got it cheap, digital, haven't played it. With Insomniac and Spider-Man, I'm kind of tempted to go back and see, especially with the lead connection. But yeah, it's okay, but yeah, it didn't do gangbusters at all.
Mm-hmm. So, according to people involved in the game, it all started when the vice president of product development of Sony Interactive Entertainment visited Insomniac to float the idea of maybe making a game using a Marvel Comics property. And they were actually kind of hesitant to take this deal because Insomniac had never made a licensed title before. This would be a first for them. They were used to only working with original properties. They were in their history, Insomniac has, of course, they created Spyro. They did Ratchet & Clank, that kind of thing.
Even Fuse.
Yeah.
Remember Fuse?
No, I don't think anyone does.
It was Overstrike, and it was really cool, and it was that, big energy to it, and then EA dumbed it down to Fuse.
Yeah. Thanks, EA. Jay Ong, who is the head of games at Marvel, said that this was specifically meant to mark a change in how they were going to handle video games from now on. Like I stated before, previous fare for pretty much any Marvel property had been games that were made to tie into movie releases or stuff like that, and for that reason, they were rushed and bad, and Marvel was kind of tired of that, it seems. So this was the first sign that Activision, who had owned the Spider-Man license up to this point since 2000, had it taken out of their grubby little paws. Thank God.
Mm-hmm.
Insomniac was apparently offered to pick from a list of Marvel characters. They were just given a list that said, pick one. You can have whatever you want. And they picked Spider-Man because why would you not pick Spider-Man? And Marvel also wanted it to be an original story. They did not want it based on any existing movie or comic and wanted Insomniac to have overall creative freedom. It was the first licensed title Insomniac has made in its 25 years of operation. So, there are actually multiple reasons they list for why they picked Spider-Man. The first one being his relatability to everyday people. A quote I really liked off the Wikipedia article from creative director Brian Intihar said, "I feel like he's the most relatable of the heroes. As much as I love Tony Stark, it's harder to identify with a billionaire. As much as I love Thor, it's hard to identify with a god. Peter makes mistakes. He has ups and downs in his career, his relationships, his family. I think we can all relate to that." And I agree with that. I think that's a very solid reason to decide that Spider-Man's your boy.
Brian Intihar is the perfect person to be the creative director for this game. He's awesome. Go listen to more interviews with him if you're really interested in learning more about Spider-Man and future, I'm sure, Spider-Man projects. He's the best.
Another reason that they went ahead and went with Spider-Man specifically is because they figured that the traversal system that they had put together in Sunset Overdrive would work as a really good base for the traversal system in Spider-Man. Because again, web swinging is important. I know the cliche line in every single review, the line that was made fun of And the cliche line that they all had was, this game really makes you feel like Spider-Man. But allow me to make a counterpoint to people making fun of that line. What do we all complain about when a bad Spider-Man game comes out? The web swinging feels bad. That's the first criticism anybody makes.
And as a result, it didn't make you feel like Spider-Man.
Yes, so I consider it, while I think that it is a cheap cliche line, and yes, every single review used it, it makes sense. Like, it perfectly describes why people really liked this game. Well, part of why people really liked this game.
And that's a testament that they nailed it. Like this, yeah, it's perfect.
Mm-hmm. The plot of the game follows a Peter Parker who has already been Spider-Man for 8 years, dealing with a new threat to New York City that is suddenly coming on the scene. And this was, again, one of the best ideas they had, because we know the backstory of Spider-Man. We know where he got bit by a spider, now he's spider powers. Uncle Ben got shot. We have seen it so many times now in so many different mediums. And it's just one of those things where it's like, everybody and their mom knows Spider-Man's backstory. You don't need to tell me how Spider-Man got his powers again. And having it be a world where Spider-Man is already a known commodity, who is just operating in New York day to day, as usual, I think it was a brilliant idea. So Yuri Lowenthal was brought in to voice Peter, and I think that he is the best voice Peter Parker has ever had. The best performance Peter Parker. I love Tom Holland. I love him. And I think that he's the best live-action Spider-Man we've ever had. But in terms of, like, animated or video game Spider-Man, Yuri Lowenthal takes it 100%.
And I know, like, people give Yuri Lowenthal, like, I was like, oh, how many seconds until Yuri Lowenthal in this medium? But, like, yeah, you're right, dude. Like, he absolutely nailed it. He was perfect. Easily one of the best parts about this game.
As well as his partner in crime fighting among the city, Police Captain Yuri Watanabe, is voiced by Tara Platt. And I bring this up specifically because I just really like laughing about the fact that Yuri Lowenthal spends an entire game talking to somebody named Yuri, who happens to be voiced by his wife. I think that's really funny.
Yeah, just like in real life wife. And like, same voices, Mitsuru Kirijo from Persona 3. And just it's so good.
Super good.
Spider Cop.
Spider
Cop is on the scene.
It's just, they have such a good dynamic, and I imagine most of that is because they're married in real life. They know how to, like, react to each other, and they're also both very good voice actors. So I don't know, I find it really funny. He's talking to a character with his name voiced by his wife.
Just in general, the cast is also incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even if it's something as simple as Mary Jane Watson is voiced by Laura Bailey, or, I mean, the actors that they got for Martin Lee or Miles Morales, or I mean, just like it goes on. I mean, yeah, Travis Willingham as Kingpin, like, so good, so smart. And we'll see, Marvel's Avengers coming up here, and they boast about the A-list cast there. But, like, I think Spider-Man did, like, they're the standard so far as, like, voice acting in a superhero game here.
Well, there's also a lot of other problems with the Avengers game, but that's a topic for another day.
Mm-hmm.
So I won't spoil anything yet, because the game, again, has not been out for a year yet. But if you have a PS4 and you haven't played this game yet, go play it. It's really, really good. It was one of my favorite games last year, if not my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Many overall design things were present in the game that I'm not going to bore everybody with, but I think they're kind of cool, and I do want to talk about a couple of them, including the map of the game is cut up into little tiles that load and unload depending on if the player's looking at them or not. Obvious stuff. That's how most games work. But the reason I bring that up is because a quote that I really, really liked was, according to developers, if you are moving at top speed, the game is loading a new tile every second. And the map is all of New York, I believe.
I think at least all of Manhattan, yeah.
Okay, all of Manhattan. That would make more sense. It's a really, really cool map. It's got the same sort of feeling as Kamurocho. Obviously, it's bigger, but it's just this self-contained open world map. I don't need Los Santos in Spider-Man. I'll take a more full New York over a mostly empty Skyrim any day.
And to stress the point, like, the transportation is so fun that you don't need to use fast travel.
There's fast travel in the game. I used it once.
Yeah, like, you barely need to use the subway because swinging is so fun.
It's not really so much like, oh, the map's not big enough that you need to use fast travel. I just didn't want to. I don't want to use fast travel. Why would I? Getting from point A to point B is a blast. It feels cool. It feels good. And I think this is the best example of an open world game. Unfortunately, it still has the problems that open world games currently see, which is that a lot of the activities peppered around that open world game, you'll start to notice that you're kind of just doing the same thing over and over again for some of them. And especially if you start going for like 100% completion, like I did, and then gave up halfway through because fighting certain mercenary sects wasn't very fun.
That's where I gave up too. Yeah, that and the Taskmaster stuff.
Yeah. You start to realize, like, this is all just the same stuff. There's not really all that much variety in what you're doing. And hopefully, if a sequel happens, when a sequel happens, they'll improve that. The other thing is that for web swinging, as we talked about, unlike previous Spider-Man games that use the raycasting technique that I talked about earlier, this actually has anchor points on every building. Every single building has a ton of anchor points on it, which you have to connect your web to in order to swing. So, like, you can go into Central Park in this game, but you got to stay in the trees because you need something to swing off of.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the point where, like, sometimes it's faster to just go around Central Park.
Or you're doing a lot of web zipping over the trees and not necessarily the big pendulum swings.
Mm-hmm. Or, like, if you go out over the ocean, that's when things become kind of a pain in the ass because you can't. What are you gonna attach to there?
But it's real, it's physics-based, and it feels so good.
Mm-hmm. The map also seamlessly combines real-world landmarks such as the Empire State Building and Madison Square Garden with Marvel Universe landmarks like Avengers Tower, Alias Investigations, and the Sanctum Sanctorum, which I really, really appreciate that touch. I really, really like that. I wish they did a little bit more with it. It gives the idea that these characters are somewhere out in the world doing their thing. I do wish, though, that, like, Jessica Jones would have made some form of, like, a cameo, or, like, one of the things I wish the game would have done is you'd be swinging around Harlem and, oh, there's Luke Cage just beating up some punks. Let's help him beat up some punks. And, like, nothing big. And that's asking too much on my end. I know.
Good sequel ideas, though, for sure.
I would definitely love to see those in the sequel.
I will remember, before the game came out, and, like, media was still a little hard to come by. They're kind of trying to keep things pretty tight-knit. I remember coming across a GIF of someone jumping off Avengers Tower as Spider-Man and diving so far, and then catching the ride, and it's at night, and the street's all lit up, and you're swinging down that street. And I'm watching this, like, it's within a week of the game coming out. It's just like, oh my God, I need this now. This is amazing. Like, unbelievable. Such a good moment.
Upon release, the game received generally favorable reviews. Most of the criticisms were the thing I brought up beforehand, which was if you really think about it, there's not actually that much to do in New York, because a lot of it's just the same thing over and over again. But the game makes up for it by having a fantastic narrative, fantastic casting, really fun gameplay. So its Metacritic score is currently sitting at an 87 out of 100. In America, the game sold 3.3 million copies in the first 3 days of release, making it the fastest-selling first-party Sony game in history, just barely beating out God of War, which had come out the same year and had sold 3.1 million copies in that same span of time.
Yeah, Sony's doing really well, guys.
Sony did really good last year.
Yeah.
Like, they killed it. And I think that's specifically why they skipped E3 this year, because they didn't have anything to show. They released everything last year. Like, Last of Us, what else do they have? They have Last of Us and
Death Stranding, Ghost of Tsushima.
Oh, crap, you're right.
Medieval remake.
Like, they have a lot of stuff, but only one of the games we just listed is coming out this year, I'm pretty sure. Unless Last of Us coming out this year? Last of Us is coming out this year, isn't it?
Last of Us is rumored to be February 2020 at the moment.
Okay.
Because there may have been a slip up in an interview. But yeah, November 8th for Death Stranding. Concrete Genie is another one from Pixel Opus. That's probably this fall. But yeah, that's really the only one kind of confirmed.
But their big gangbusters had come out last year.
Oh,
and
sure.
The new big gangbusters were not quite ready for dates yet. Insomniac apparently has had a policy of refusing to confirm if a sequel is going to happen or not. Let's be honest, a sequel is happening. We just said it sold 3.3 million copies in 3 days. That being said, Marvel has stated that when it comes to video games, Spider-Man is now considered in Sony and Insomniac's hands.
Oh, yeah.
Probably a smart move.
They earned it.
They did indeed earn it. I don't think that... A lot of people seem to assume that the video game rights for Spider-Man specifically belong to Sony. I don't know if that's the case. We know the film rights do, obviously. But I don't think that's the case with that, simply because, like, if that was the case, why is Spider-Man in Ultimate Alliance 3? Which is one of the reasons why I'm doing this game, by the way. It comes out this week.
Oh, there you go. Nice. Yeah, I mean, it's a big Marvel Games thing. And as you said, like, Marvel Games have kind of a new policy where they're trying to pick and choose their battles, like pick the best developers in the world for those specific properties and the games that they want to see made. So
they want to see good games come out of their properties instead of the tripe we've been seeing for years.
And what the hell's going on for DC, Warner Brothers, Rocksteady? What you working on? Gotta see it. What's happening?
One day we'll know what Rocksteady's making, but one day maybe. So the music for Spider-Man was done by John Paesano. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. I believe I am. Sadly, not a lot of background info on him. What I did find was that he was born on July 2nd, 1977 in Birmingham, Michigan. So there you go. You got a Michigan boy.
It's like a half hour from where I live.
Oh, nice. He studied classical music with Professor Sally Dow Miller of the Conservatoire de Paris. I think that's how you
Nicely done. Yeah.
I don't know why Wikipedia decided that it should mention specifically the professor that he studied under, but it did, so I figured I might as well include it too. And then he continued his studies after that at the Berklee College of Music, where he had a focus on music composition. His first credited film was the TV movie Ben 10, Secret of the Omnitrix. He also did a Batman and Superman movie in 2010, a straight-to-video movie. So he had already had a little bit of experience with superhero stuff before doing this game, and he got even more between then and Spider-Man, which we'll get to in a second. He has worked under big film composers such as Jerry Goldsmith and John Williams, because John Paesano is primarily a film composer. So he's that ties into the whole thing with the Heavy Rain composer, talking about how he was hoping that this would bring classical composers into games, and you mentioned that sort of happened, and you are right. Here's an example of one right here.
Mm-hmm.
As for what he has worked on, he has scored all 3 of the Maze Runner films, which, did you know there are 3 of those? I didn't. I thought there was just 1. But there's 3, I guess. That's cool. Sure. He scored the Daredevil and Defenders series on Netflix. So again, had some experience not only with superheroes, but with Marvel superheroes specifically. As for games, he has done 3 other games outside of Spider-Man. He has done Mass Effect Andromeda.
Yo, don't sleep on that soundtrack. It's actually pretty darn good.
Gran Turismo Sport, which, all right, sure. And funnily enough, Quantic Dream's Detroit Become Human, where he specifically scored Marcus's sections of the game.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know if we'll ever get to it sometime because, like, 3 playable characters in that game, 3 separate composers to handle, like, the different tones and all that. So, yeah, that's pretty neat.
As for the actual development of the soundtrack, that I was able to find a full interview where he talked about his experiences sort of working on this game. Unfortunately, it was the only one I could find. I found it on his website. So it's a good thing I went and found that. He says that he worked on the score not for 2 months, but for around 2 years. Initially being brought in at the end of the writing stage when characters were kind of decided on exactly what they were going to be doing.
See, David Cage, that's what you got to do.
And he says it felt more like they were working on a film than a standalone game, which, considering he's primarily a film composer, this excited him. He really liked that. Insomniac wanted distinct themes for every character, which was one of the main reasons they brought Paesano in so early. He was grateful for this time and says that they took advantage of every second they could. While Spider-Man has always been a fun and bouncy character, the game took the approach of aging him up, making him more adult, more mature, but not too much because it's still Spider-Man. He's still got to not shut up ever when you fight, which is another thing this game does fantastically. Is Spider-Man feels annoying to all the people he's fighting.
The writing is so clever.
Paesano wanted to take that approach and also use it in terms of the music. He wanted to make something that felt like Spider-Man, but also felt more grown up than the music you've heard when you've seen like a 16-year-old Spider-Man. One of his hurdles was that he wanted something that felt new, which is kind of hard when you're dealing with something like Spider-Man, which has had so many themes and movie scores and TV shows and all sorts of stuff throughout the years. He wanted something that didn't feel like those, but also needed something that felt like Spider-Man.
He does have a track on the soundtrack, though, and I'm blanking on which one it is. I apologize. But there is a track on the soundtrack, if you get to listen to it, where he references musical cues from all of the different other Spider-Man, whether it's cinematic interpretations or even maybe a little bit of the old TV show. There's just little hints and references there. So I think that's really interesting. Like, it doesn't have to be distinct. I mean, you pay homage, certainly, but make the soundtrack your own, but you can throw in a little couple jingles here and there.
I agree with that, because like one of the most hype moments I've ever had going into a Marvel movie is at the start of Homecoming, when it starts with the symphonic rendition of the dun 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 dun, and I was like, ah! I've been a fan of Spider-Man since I was a child, so I never read comics. I should note that. I don't read comics. I probably never will. But as a kid, Spider-Man was my jam, and it's still my jam. I love Spider-Man a lot. One cool thing is that Paesano tried to make sure that Peter's theme was always interwoven into the music, regardless of basically what was happening. So even during villain fight themes, you can still hear the Spider-Man theme coming through every once in a while, just to make sure that the soundtrack felt less jumbled and easier to keep track of, so that it wasn't just, all right, this is the music for Mary Jane, this is the music for Shocker, this is the music for Electro, there's Rhino's music, gotta get Yuri's music in there. And so you didn't have to keep track of a billion different themes, and instead you had, here's the variation on Spider-Man's theme that plays when this character is involved. Or something similar to that. It's not really that. That's oversimplifying it a little bit, I think. Mm-hmm. But you get what I'm saying.
But yeah, I mean, it's all the composition in cues and then mixing them in at certain moments. Again, we talked about that before. I mean, it's a good thing that Spider-Man's theme is so good, and of course we'll get to it. But yeah, you definitely hear it quite a bit throughout the game.
On a non-music note, one really cool piece of trivia that everybody already knows, but that's not going to stop me from talking about it. Yuri Lowenthal recorded every line that is not spoken in a cutscene twice. Because they needed one version where it's him just talking normally, and one version where it sounds like he's exerting himself while he's talking, because in the middle of like phone calls in the overworld, you could get in a fight. And it's kind of weird if you're in a fight and you're just talking like you're standing on the street corner. So those can apparently like switch out halfway through lines.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I find that really, really cool. I really like that.
I mean, yeah, even if it's something as simple as one moment you're swinging through the web and then next minute you land on the roof and you're just walking.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to account for that. So yeah, kudos to Insomniac. So good. This soundtrack though is just amazing.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about our 5 critical tracks. And we can't start on any other track, but the one literally titled Spider-Man. This is the main theme of the game. It's the main theme of Spider-Man. It's the main theme of Peter Parker. It's this triumphant and hopeful theme that basically just sums up the general tone of what the game is going for. It's simple. It's memorable. I really don't know what else to say about it.
I mean, yeah, you're going to hear that whole cue of the da da bum 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 just throughout the whole game, and even the da 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 da, and just these swelling violins. It's incredible. It feels so like in tune with the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe and like the Avengers theme and like that kind of instrumentation, that kind of sound, and it just feels like a kind of continuation of what they're trying to go for. And I feel like that's its biggest accomplishment overall. And oh, by the way, we're again just emphasizing we're going to get into spoilers here in the critical 5.
Yeah. Spoilers are going to start coming in.
Spoilers will be coming. So just warn yourself here. If you have not played the game, might be a good time to jump ahead in the timestamps. But yeah, it's just a fantastic theme, which we'll see return in a couple other songs here and there. But oh man, it's the, again, when we talk about like, this is the one that everyone knows that like you hear this song. Yep. It's this one. It was the Ethan Mars theme in Heavy Rain. It's the aptly titled Spider-Man in this one. So
after that, we have my personal favorite song on the soundtrack, Shocking Turn of Events. So this is the music for investigation, chase, and boss fight sequences that involve the Spider-Man villain, the Shocker.
Wait, he's in this game?
So when I was coming up with the top 5 of this, I mentioned this and I was like, yeah, I think this involves the Shocker. And Peter was like, sure would be Electro? I was like, no, it's Shocker. He's like, why do I not remember Shocker being in this game? Which, if that is not the most fitting for the character of the Shocker, I don't know what is. The Shocker has always sort of been like the joke of the Spider-Man Rogues Gallery.
And then I look at the picture and it's like, oh yeah, that inconsequential fight. And because, yeah, you fight Kingpin at the beginning of the game. And that's like, learn the controls. And then it's this fight with Shocker. that it's learn how a boss fight works.
Yeah. And it's a cool boss fight, but then he just sort of disappears from the plot after that.
Yeah, like he's completely inconsequential from there on out. So yeah, it's like when I think, oh, because Electro's in the game too. I go, well, yeah, that's my bad.
But I found myself, this is the song I found myself continually going back to listen to, because I listened to this soundtrack a lot over the span of this week of research, because this is my first time doing an episode on a soundtrack that I haven't actually really listened to all that much outside of the game.
I mean, yeah, I think I would agree with that. I mean, yeah, for as much as I love the game as well, for not really remembering, shocker, geez. Yeah, it's the main theme. And what else? Like, again, like the soundtrack does such a great job of improving the scenes around it. It's just like Norman Corbeil with Heavy Rain. But, I mean, yeah, we'll think of certain moments, but yeah, listen to the whole soundtrack and what stands out. It took some work this week. Because
it also, it's the same sort of situation as the film scores. Because again, this sounds a lot like a film score. And it works a lot like a film score. But like, I liked Far From Home. I haven't listened to the soundtrack of Far From Home.
Right.
That's on Spotify too, but I haven't gone to listen to it. So it's kind of in that same area.
I find it interesting though that you liked this one the most. I mean, there are other songs for me that really stand out, but it's got this cool electric distortion kind of running through. It's like a ripple current effect, fitting for the shocker. But I find it interesting that you like this one as your favorite.
I'm not entirely sure why. I think that distortion is a big part of it because it's a unique thing that's not really in any of the other pieces. And it just feels really, really cool to hear that in this kind of thing. And of all the damn villains, this could be the theme for. The Shocker is the one.
Yeah.
Up next, for number 3, we have City of Hope. Swinging on a web, swinging on a web, swinging on a web. This is the web swinging music. I believe, if I remember correctly, the song for web swinging is kind of dynamic. It builds in intensity until you reach like full speed.
Yes.
And then it's this.
Yeah, built on all these different cues, and just kind of adapts to what you're doing. But yeah, well, at the clip here for this one, like it's kind of at its peak. It's that full swell of the Spider-Man theme. And I like the part in particular where like it goes into the choir. Like that's a cool feeling, like when you're swinging, you're like getting that whole kind of in the instrumentation there. Oh, such a good song. Yeah, this is just normal daytime New York swinging music for sure.
This piece alone makes it so much cooler to be swinging around New York. And it does change later on in the game, but then once you beat the game, it's back to being just this, I believe. And it never gets old. That's the crazy part, is it never feels like it gets old.
And yeah, I mean, again, when we talk about things like, a field theme for an old JRPG, like it's the same song and it better be damn good because you're going to hear it a lot. But when it's so dynamic, and again, like a soundtrack is the distillation of all these different cues that can come into like its ideal experience, but because games are games and they're interactive and they're fluid, again, like you're not hearing the same thing twice.
Yeah. After that, for number 4, we have The Demon He Became. This is the theme for when you fight Negative Man, aka Martin Lee, who is a villain I had never heard of before.
Apparently, he was only in comic circulation for like 7 years. So it was like a way to introduce people who hadn't been reading comics as of late. I mean, yeah, certainly at first I had heard of him, but he wasn't created just for this game, certainly. And yeah, they definitely play it up because like he owns the sort of shelter that Aunt May works at. And so like there's the family connection. He's someone Peter trusts, but no, he has this undercurrent, this demon energy.
He is a very cool villain, and this song is super intense and cool. I think a big part of it is the heavy drums and the heavy orchestration behind it. Just everything is heavy.
Percussion's going nuts.
Oh, yeah. And like I said, I'd never heard of Negative Man before this game, but now I have, and now I like him. Yeah,
this one's awesome. It's quite a memorable boss fight. It's like the big second go around, like the real showdown you have with him. And of course, like the track kind of is like the build up to it, and like the big bombastic stuff we play for the clip. Like that's the fight. Yeah, like again, it really supports the moment so well.
As for our final track in the Critical Tracks, we have Destroying Your Own Creation.
Get out now. Get out now if you don't want spoilers. Like, last warning. Last warning.
Now, to be fair, I don't consider this a huge spoiler, because the second you meet this character, if you know anything about Spider-Man, you instantly say, oh, so that's the one then. All right.
It was the E3 2017 trailer that ended on the cliffhanger, and you're like, 1, 2, 3. Oh, they're trying Sinister Six stuff. Well, who's missing?
Throughout the game, Peter Parker's day job is working in a lab with one person you might find kind of familiar if you know literally anything about Spider-Man, whose name is Otto Octavius. And of course, about halfway through the game, Otto Octavius becomes Dr. Octopus, because that's what Otto Octavius does. That's what he's always done. That's what he'll always do.
And he's starting to slip with a, sort of personality. Like, you see it happening. It doesn't come completely out of nowhere. Like, you see it coming. Really good portrayal of this version of Doc Ock. Voiced by the actor who plays Mordin Solus in Mass Effect 3. Because I guess in 2 and 3 there were different actors. But I just always think, like, yeah, it's Mordin. And fits well for a scientist. But it's an incredible performance. Again, the cast is so good in this game, and applies to Ock here.
One of the stories I actually saw about Dr. Octopus while researching is that while designing him, they looked at his regular design, which is the stupid looking bowl cut and the sunglasses and all that sort of thing, and decided that they wanted to make a bit of a different Otto Octavius. So they changed his personality completely. He's kind of just this dork until he goes nuts. He's kind of just this dork instead of the megalomaniac sort of character that Otto Octavius is in the comics. And they also changed his design from the stupid bowl cut, which, good call, to like the balding sort of what they described as a lovable looking nerd. And I think that was a good call on that. And throughout the game, you see Peter seeing Octavius as his mentor, and then that relationship kind of breaking down, and then suddenly Octavius is Dr. Octopus, and he's breaking people out of the Raft, which is S.H.I.E.L.D.'s big maximum security prison for supervillains. And he's the final boss, and this song plays during, I think it's the ending sequence of the final boss.
Yep.
Which is the part that I remember the most with the I don't remember if this would be included in that sequence, but like when they're on the side of the building and you've got to dodge the lunges from his arms, and Peter is just screaming like, "I looked up to you."
Yep. That's what this is. And it's like he has to shut down. It's where the title comes from, destroying your own creation. Like he has to rip off the arms, essentially. You have to basically dismantle him. Like it's the comeuppance of the fight. It's so good. Like it builds up to this moment that's in the clip. But it's such an incredible final boss. I mean, just the start is a little tedious because you're swinging around and it's all like electrified and it's dangerous. But yeah, it's this intense emotional moment. It's the side of the building. It's up close. It's like right in your face, and it's incredible. Just remarking on the ending as a whole, like, you know, the leading up to the final boss. I was watching Extra Credits recently, and they did an episode where it's a YouTube series, in case you haven't heard of it. It talks about gaming in these short little episodes, like specific game design theory topics. And it's the idea of like, why do many games kind of fail to deliver a satisfying ending? And it's like, oh, well, there's, you know, running out of development time, well, you know, not tested enough. Developers don't necessarily know what the player's skill level will be at that time, or, you know, to test it, you have to play through the whole thing, or it's generally one of the last things to be put together because making the game comes first. And I feel like this is totally not the case with Spider-Man, because it nails the final boss. It nails the narrative payoff after that. It nails the cliffhangers that it sets up at the end. I'm just because we're about to talk about Spider-Man, I'm watching this and like, no, Spider-Man nails it. Like, it's amazing.
And it's especially impressive considering, again, the instant Otto Octavius shows up on screen and they're like, yeah, we're messing with this sort of interface technology that lets me use these cool arms. You're like, oh, so that's where this is going. Like,
it's like, oh no.
Anybody that knows anything about Spider-Man knows that Dr. Octopus is on his way. And they still did it in a way that was very like emotionally moving, and it worked super well. And I find that more impressive than just about anything else, is that they can take this plot that I already know, because I already know he's Dr. Octopus. It's like when if you throw Kurt Connors in front of me, it's like, one day I'm going to regrow this arm. Oh, so he's going to be the Lizard. Okay. Like this, it's a known quantity. And they still pulled it off fantastically.
And even at that moment at the end where like he's trying to take pity on him just to try to like, it's like, oh, Peter, can you help me? I'm so sorry. I didn't know what I was doing. And then he's trying to get him that one line. Oh, it's so good.
It's fantastic. As for songs on the cutting room floor, we both got a couple. Hit me with yours.
Well, we'll continue with that Dr. Octopus theme, and we'll mention the Mastermind. Because who could it possibly be? I think this sets up a really good just villain leitmotif. Like, it sets up the villain theme. You know, earlier in the piece, it's kind of like light and spooky a little bit, but the like it's really given to you, and like that's where he first reveals himself. Granted, to the Spider-Man fans' complete lack of surprise, but it's still a cool reveal moment.
I agree with that.
The other one is City on Alert. And I think while City of Hope represents, free swinging, feeling good in the day in New York without a care in the world. This is kind of where like the city's under duress, and that may be, you know, when there's a mission going on, when you're kind of in the end game and all things are kind of going to hell.
At a certain point, swinging around New York stops being fun. Not from a gameplay perspective, but for Peter Parker, swinging around New York stops being fun.
Mm-hmm. And that's where this kind of plays in. It's like a different sort of feel, and it's a vibe that kind of turns up the pressure, and when I listened through it, kind of caught my ear, so I really like this one too.
For me, my two are The Sinister Six which they broke out. Oh no! This game, Sinister Six, is a version that does not have the Green Goblin because in this universe it does not exist. He does not exist yet. Norman Osborn is a pre-goblinified man.
He's still a thing, but yeah.
Yeah. Or Mysterio. Boo, give me Mysterio in the sequel. I know he already exists in this universe. You told me. Where is Mysterio? I really like Mysterio. That's why I was very excited that he was in Far From Home. And they did him really well in that movie. But, yeah, the Sinister Six has always had kind of a fluid membership. It's never been the same group of 6 Spider-Man villains. There are a couple of, like, constants. I think Dr. Octopus is one of the constants. I believe the Rhino and Electro are usually members. In this game, it is Electro, Rhino, Scorpion, Mr. Negative, Vulture, and Dr. Octopus. Which, by the way, we both like gushed about this in our own DMs before we started recording a couple days ago. That Vulture Electro fight is one of the coolest fights in a while.
I still think the Doc Ock fight is like the best boss fight just for like narrative reasons. But if you're talking from like mechanics and just feeling like Spider-Man and feeling really cool, I mean, yeah, the Vulture and Electro fight is far and away the best. Scorpion and Rhino, just a pain. Like, it was not fun.
Scorpion and Rhino boss fight not only is not fun to play, but it's also just boring. Like, I would have rather... I know that the whole thing people said was like, oh man, the Rhino's in this game. I wonder if there's going to be a boss fight where I get out of the way while he's charging and then he hits the wall and is dizzy and then I can punch him. And granted, they didn't do that. I'll give them that. But the solution they came up with isn't great. And then Scorpion is also there, I guess. That fight's not great. But the Electro Vulture fight, fully mid-air boss fight, cool fight.
Yes, absolutely.
And my other one is Responsibility. We can't figure out where this plays in the game. We thought it played in, again, spoilers, Get Out. We thought it played when Aunt May died. It doesn't.
Which, by the way, holy cow, they actually did it. Are you serious?
Yeah, they killed Aunt May.
What the hell?
In the Wikipedia article, it does mention that they specifically designed Aunt May's death to be as a mirror to Uncle Ben's death, whereas Uncle Ben's death was the result of Peter making a selfish choice for himself, and that backfiring and ending in his uncle's death. Aunt May's death is the result of Peter making a selfless action to save New York, which unfortunately results in Aunt May's death. And it's a much nicer scene, and it's just... What a good way to end that game. Oof. This song doesn't play in that scene. The song that does play in that scene is not on the soundtrack.
Yeah, put it on there, you cowards.
It was really weird discovering that. We don't know where this could play. Maybe it plays during some points where Miles is talking about his dad. Maybe it plays when like Peter's talking to MJ or something. I don't know.
It's still a really nice piece though.
It's a very, very, very pretty piano piece. I like it.
A lot of acoustic guitar too, which is like different instrumentation than most of the soundtrack.
So what'll I never forget about the game? Man, this game plays so buttery smooth. This plays so good. And Spider-Man is so well written, and it's just, the only two bad parts I can think of in the entire game, well, three bad things in the entire game, is that Sable is not fun to fight, and that's what broke me being able to do 100% completion.
Yeah,
is that I think I made it about 70% into completing it, and then I was like, I don't want to do another Sable base. I just don't care.
I mean, collecting all like the backpacks and the photos, those are awesome.
Those are super fun, because especially the backpacks, because then the backpacks are just like, this is a piece of lens from Mysterio's helmet that caused me to want to put stronger lenses in my mask. Like, that's cool. There's also the suits. I love all of the suits. I spent most of the game in the Stark suit because Homecoming is probably my favorite Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I spent most of it in the default one. Like I was fine with that, and it's a good looking suit.
Mm-hmm. I also remember that Web Blossom is overpowered. I think they patched it to make it less overpowered. Yeah. I hope not, because that got me through most combat. Because I'm not super good at it.
I still have yet to play the DLC, though. I have it. I own the DLC, just yet to get to it.
I don't own the DLC, but I also have to play it. I just haven't had a chance, and I would also have to go reinstall the game, because the worst part about PS4 is every time I buy a new PS4 game, I have to uninstall another PS4 game, and it's like choosing which of my children are to die at that point. But I will get to the DLC, especially because I just want to play a game where I can see Black Cat maybe now this time. That'll be great. I want to see her.
Yeah, so much to love about this game. And just when we get a sequel, because we will get a sequel, as we said, like, it will be incredible. It'll be so good. And I think it's thrilling, the fact that they're using Spider-Man PS4 to show off the next generation PlayStation and its solid state loading. And it's like, yeah, there's no loading, times for the world. You fast travel and you're just there. Or you can swing so much that the world just loads faster than you need to. Like, all the stuff that they're showing is incredible. It's so good. It makes me so excited for the future, not only for PlayStation 5, but for a sequel for this game. And the story stuff that they've teased out, like the fact that, we're already there with spoilers, let's be honest, that Harry Osborn is going to be symbiote related, whether he's Venom or something else. I mean, come on. That's so exciting. And you'll do stuff with Miles Morales that, they're supposed to be in separate dimensions, but this game put them together as two Spider-Mans in one universe. That's so good.
Here are my demands. This is all I ask. And it's a lot. But also, do it. Please put like other smaller Marvel characters making cameos. You don't have to do this. This isn't required. Like, the game will be just fine if you don't do this. It won't be fine if you don't include Mysterio in this one. So do that. We talked about Arkham City earlier. One thing that Arkham City does is that there are little side quests of other villains in Arkham City where you can go beat up the Penguin. You can go you were supposed to be able to go fight the Riddler. That was a lie. But you get what I mean. Or like Freeze has his own stuff. And Spider-Man doesn't really have that. Spider-Man has the Tombstone stuff, and that's really about it.
And Screwball.
And Screwball as well. But I would like to see more of that, more of dealing with some villains that aren't necessarily involved with the main plot.
Yeah, get more into the rogues gallery for sure.
So Spider-Man has one of the best rogues gallery ever.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
It's fantastic.
Well, gosh, I know we've gone on a lot about both these games. I mean, just kind of gushing about like great game soundtracks that play like movie scores. And so like it's tough to pick them, but really games that are all about secret identities. And so definitely the theme for this week. So that will do it for this episode of Original Soundchat. Thank you so much for listening. You can find me on Twitter at Pete Speakeasy. Joe is over at The Dobaga. You can find the video version for the show on rhymeswithasia.com and the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel. But it's that audio MP3 version you want over on Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. Podcast services all around the globe. Apple Podcasts, Google Play. Get it on while you're going on a run, driving to work, while you're at work. I mean, just listen to great conversations about video game music and their soundtracks. Absolutely. Patreon over at patreon.com/anondino. Getting those episodes up a little early for at least dollar tier members to access and listen to a little early. That Spotify playlist is still going. You keep adding things if they're available. I mean, Spider-Man's on it for sure.
Spider-Man is, Heavy Rain is not, unfortunately.
That's a bummer. But yeah, I mean, gosh, listen to the whole Spider-Man soundtrack. It's so good, but we'll have our stuff on there. If it is, we can't put the whole podcast on it, but we like to add the songs that we talk about, if they're on Spotify, there onto a playlist. And then our social media for the show is at Soundchat OST. So you can leave feedback for us, give us suggestions of games that we should talk about going forward in the future. Like, what are we talking about next week? Which composer are we talking about?
Talking about Kevin Penkin.
Ooh, I'll be talking about Ray Kondo. Very interesting. I like the theme for next week's episode. That'll also be a fun one. But Joe, let's play us out.
So, because this is a new soundtrack, it was actually kind of hard to find this. But I did manage to stumble upon a very cool violin cover of the main theme of Spider-Man, again titled Spider-Man. It is by YouTuber Rob Landis, and it's very, very good, so please enjoy that.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Original Soundchat. We'll see you next week. Take care.